Hey, I'm Sion, an American living in Kazakhstan, and this is These Are My People. Each episode, I sit down with one friend to talk about where they want to be 10 years from now, what drives them, and the plans they're making to get there. We'll also dive into one interesting topic. These are ordinary people with ordinary dreams. Hi guys, and welcome to These Are My People. This week on the podcast, I have with me my mom. Hi mom, welcome to the podcast. Mom doesn't like to do this kind of thing, podcast, or be in the center of attention, but she graciously, I guess, agreed. I think she didn't have a choice. So thank you for coming, even though you didn't have a choice to come on the podcast today. So, Mom, I have a few questions to talk about you, and then I have one topic in general that I want us to discuss today. But first of all, I think a lot of people who know me might know this, and a lot of people who know you know that you grew up in Africa. And so I wanted to ask you, what do you think you got from growing up in Africa that you wouldn't have gotten if you had grown up in the States?
I always say that growing up in Africa was a better life than growing up in America. I feel like growing up in America is okay, but Africa was a very good childhood. We had a very simple life, a very small environment that I grew up in. In America, there's a lot of peer pressure.
Yeah.
It starts with children, but it goes all the way through adults. And I feel like growing up in Africa, there was no peer pressure to be a certain kind of person. You just were yourself. And I felt like growing up there, my world was bigger. Americans have a very small world. Their focus is very small. But when you get out of America, you realize how big the world is.
So for you, you said life was better growing up in Africa, or childhood at least, because you had less peer pressure and your worldview was bigger.
And it was just simple. The things that I feel like it was a slow lifestyle, the things that you wanted to do. If you wanted to read a book, you had time to read the books. Whereas I feel like in America, there's never enough time to do the things that you would like to do.
It's interesting. I guess I think about Grandpa growing up. Grandpa grew up in the States, but he would have had a very simple, slow childhood. So I guess that in America happened sometime between Grandpa's generation and your generation. The more fast-paced, or was it based on location?
I think it was a time in America when he grew up that life was a lot simpler. I don't know when it changed, but he would have had the same slow lifestyle.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about you? I often think about, so I was born in the States. I grew up the first 10 years in New Zealand. Then we lived in Georgia, the state, for 2 years. Then I lived in California 8 years, I guess, and then moved to Kazakhstan about 7 years ago. And I think, how different would I be? Our personality, I think a lot of it comes from birth, how we're born, how we're raised. But I think too, some of it comes from your environment. So the different places I've lived. For example, if I hadn't lived in Kazakhstan the last 7 years, how different would I be? You guys talk about how I'm more maybe less nice after living, I don't know how to put it, but less nice after living in Kazakhstan for 7 years. And I think that's true. I think because of the environment, I've definitely become less open to new people, less nice, less smiley with new people. But have you ever thought about that, how different you would be if you hadn't grown up in Africa? And what do you think would be different about you if you hadn't grown up there?
I think the whole thing about American life is very materialistic, very driven. to accomplish things. And I think growing up in Africa is not materialistic. Nobody had anything. We as missionary children had very little, but a lot of times we had more than anybody else. But when we came back to the States, we realized how little we did have. But you know, always in America, it's always, you always want to be accomplishing something. You know, Jeff will come home at the end of the day and, what did you do today? It's like, I'm a housewife. I clean the house. You know, I didn't get anything wonderful done, but in America, it's always, you don't feel like you can sit down in the middle of the day and read a book. You always have to be accomplishing something, working at something. And so I do think I carried that with me, as far as not really caring about it. It's very easy to get sucked into that lifestyle, that mentality in America of materialism and wanting to be seen as accomplishing something, doing something wonderful, standing out above anybody else. But I think that my childhood, probably those things don't matter as much to me.
I see.
As a lot of the other people that I know in America.
You mentioned about not having much growing up in Africa, but not really realizing it, right? You didn't realize until you could compare yourself with the other people coming back to the States. I remember the first time I went to Thailand, I was 16 or 17. And I know oftentimes we see videos, pictures of people from third world, maybe also second world countries, and we think, oh, they have nothing, it's so sad. But I remember when I went to Thailand, I thought, you know, they don't have all this stuff that we have in the States. Even here in Kazakhstan, most people have lots of stuff, but their life is simple and they have everything they need. They're not hungry. They're not like in desperate need of anything. They have what they need. It's just more simple, and it's not bad. Would you say it was the same growing up in Africa, that in general most people had what they needed? At least most people, right? Of course you still have everywhere people in poverty, but for the most part people had what they needed, just not all this extra stuff. Is that?
Well, I remember taking some women to Africa a few years ago, and we were working out in the rural areas, and on the way back some of the ladies commented, how can these people, they act so happy, how can they be so happy when they live in a mud hut and they have nothing, they have to walk everywhere, they have to work in the fields. And they were saying, how can they be so happy? And I remember commenting that it's a reflection of, why are you not happy? You have a car, you have a beautiful house, you have money in the bank, you have no needs, and yet you're not happy, you're not content. And so I think it's not a bash America.
Sure.
But
sure.
it's a reflection of Americans being very materialistic and always wanting more and more, the newer, the better, never being content with what you do have. And so I think that is something that people in third worlds learn, to be content. They don't see all the things that I could have. It's like children watching television in America and they say, oh, I don't have that toy. They say I need that toy.
Yeah.
So you don't see all the things that you could have that people tell you that you need.
Yeah.
So I think it's just a contentment in life, because you have what you need, so you're content.
Yeah. The next question I wanted to ask you was, for you, what's a good life? Which kind of comes from your conversation about contentment.
Again, I think probably personality-wise.
Right, yeah, of course it's different for different people.
But a good life for me, I value people. I value I think it's about value. I'm a Christian, so I value my relationship with God. I value that, who I am in God, that God loves me and He has a purpose for me. and that I am in that purpose. But also I value the people around me, my family, and those interactions, those relationships. I think that would determine a good life for me.
So for you, good life would mean knowing that you're in the purpose that you believe that God has shown you for your life, and also being able to be close to your family and your close people, whatever that looked like. Yeah. The last question about you before we get into the topic is, you're very into Jewish blah blah. So my mom, she likes to read about Judaism, okay? She likes to listen to Hebrew music, we'll put it like that. We've been to Israel twice. You went once when you were younger. And it's fascinating for you. I mean, you like it. You're into it. And the reason I say Jewish blah blah is not to be offensive at all, but my grandmother knows that mom is into Jewish culture, history, music. And what was the story exactly?
We were listening, so we had Alexa. And so my mother and Sion were there at my house, and Sion said, let's listen to something. So she said, what kind of music would you like to listen to? We asked my mother, and she said, not Jewish blah blah.
Yeah, so
she doesn't remember that.
So how did I remember? Maybe I was, I guess, 15, 16 years old, and I started reading like that book, The Chosen. We started watching some movies about focused on people from Jewish culture, and I read a few things. And I remember about that time also you got into Jewish blah blah. How did you get into that, and why for you is it so fascinating?
I think that we went to Israel in 2019, and I remember coming back. It was a trip to Israel, really a pilgrimage. Coming back and really wanting to find out more about the biblical perspective from the Jewish side. And so I really remember trying to find online different teachers that taught from the Jewish perspective. And from there it just went into, their music, just the land, the culture. I think it went from there, that pilgrimage, and just trying to figure out, as a Christian, again, growing up, I learned the Christian perspective, the Western Christian perspective, and then realizing that the Jewish perspective that comes from the Bible is a whole deeper level of understanding. So I just started going there, and then just the music, and it just went
She
from
even
there.
took Hebrew lessons about a year?
Yeah.
A year or a bit more?
Yeah.
So can you tell us something in Hebrew?
Lo.
So I think a lot of people forget that Jesus was actually Jewish, right? They think that Jesus was this white man, he was a Christian, but sometimes people forget actually Christianity came from the people who followed Jesus, based on his life, coming from what he did in his life, and that actually he was Jewish and he grew up in Jewish culture, going to the Jewish synagogue. So people forget that Jesus was a Jew. Okay, so I wanted to get into the topic for today, which I sent you some information about it, but basically I wanted to talk about the benefit of choosing the harder choice, making the harder decision now in benefit for the future. And this can be, I think, in any kind of topic. It can be from finances, right? Choosing to save, not buy what you want now in order to get something better later, or to have money for what you want later. It can be going to bed early even though you want to stay up and do something so that tomorrow you have the benefit of that energy. Or what other kind of decision could it be? You want to eat a cookie or a burger, but making the decision, it can be a hard decision not to eat that so that you have the benefit of not having those extra calories later. So it can be, I think, in every area of our life. Why do you think it's tempting to choose the easy thing now, and why is it so hard to not choose the easy thing now so that we can save whatever it is for the future?
I think we live in a very, I would call it fast food mentality.
Yeah.
We want something now, so we go and we get it now. And that really, it's never the best way to live in that way. So, going to McDonald's, every once in a while is fine. But, to want something, what I want and what I want now, that's maybe the easiest way. But it's, discipline, there's a lot to say for discipline. And as we know, our whole life, as you said, like exercising, eating, working for something rather than just sitting and expecting it to fall in your lap. Discipline is not something that anybody likes, but we know that in life, we don't just get to sit and get what we want out of life.
Yeah. It's interesting you talk about discipline, because I was reading some research, and I didn't include it in my notes because I hadn't planned to talk about it, but there was a scientific study about decision making, and I think it's your frontal vortex or some part of your brain that's involved in decision making, and especially hard decision making. And it said, so the discipline, we'll say, of decision making is something that can improve. I guess it makes sense, but the more you make decisions based on delayed gratification, the stronger that parts of your brain gets, and the easier it is for you to make that decision. So I guess it starts even from, I would say, childhood. Your parents teaching you to make the right decision, or you can't have this now because this is going to be later, instead of just giving you everything you want now. I guess that would also play a part in helping you to choose decisions based on delayed gratification. Delayed gratification meaning you choose to wait to feel happy instead of choosing something that instantly gratifies you now, but maybe less gratification, right? So have you heard of, I'm pretty sure, and I'm pretty sure you guys too have seen the videos, the marshmallow test, where they put a child a few years old and they give them a marshmallow and they say, you can eat it, either don't eat it until I come back, or if you eat it now, you only get one, but if you wait to eat it, then I'll give you two. So you've seen that, right? Okay. So there was a test about that, and I guess the results said that the children who wait for the second marshmallow, they have better life outcomes. They have higher SAT scores, better stress management. That for me is really interesting, that just based on your decision making, it can affect that. Why do you think it is that that kind of test can have that kind of result?
Well, again, I think it's I want it and I want it now, as opposed to thinking if I wait, it can be better. And realizing that there are some things that aren't good for me now.
Yeah.
Some things are meant for later.
Yeah.
Or if I wait, then it'll, I'll have more later, or it will be better, or my opportunities will be more if I wait later, later. Again, I think it's interesting what you were talking about, the exercise of your brain, because it is easier, I think, the more you exercise discipline in an area, then the easier it is to do it the next time.
Yeah, yeah.
So then, the more you think of the future rather than right now, then the more you're willing to wait. And I do think when you wait for something, it's more enjoyable.
Yeah.
You enjoy it more.
Enjoy it more. I mean, so let's say that we have two options. One is now, or we can wait for the second. It's not always guaranteed that the second one will be better or that we will enjoy it more. But I think, it's about discipline. It's about not regretting too. Oftentimes when we choose the instant gratification, we have this regret, like, oh, I could have had that instead. You know, I think about people, a lot of times I hear people say they don't have enough money to travel, they don't have enough money to do this or that. But I see how often they buy new clothes. I see they buy a coffee every day in a cafe. For me, that's a precise example of this exactly, because you're choosing instant gratification. You're choosing to get a coffee every day. But if you saved all that money, you could take a trip. If you didn't buy clothes all the time, you could, I was telling you yesterday, right? We were in the mall. I like to go look, especially if I have time to kill, I like to go look, but then it gets boring for me because I know I'm not going to buy anything because, yeah, it's really cute, but I have clothes at home. I have so many clothes at home. I don't need any more clothes. The clothes I have now are great. So why spend that money now for something that, yeah, you feel good when you buy new clothes for a week, maybe a week. But then after that gratification wears off and you can have some better gratification later. I guess it's about discipline, but it doesn't make sense to me when people always want to spend small money and think that they have no money. So
It's always it's something a different coming at a different angle. Is that if you have, so on the way to the park today, Sion has this great place that she buys croissants, and they are amazing. So we bought some croissants, but if I went and bought one of them every day, they wouldn't be special anymore.
Yeah,
I
that's
think,
true.
it's not that wonderful anymore. So, we might think, oh, I could do it every day,
Yeah.
but then I don't enjoy it so much. So maybe I just will do it every once in a while,
Mhm.
and I enjoy it much more.
Mhm.
Even if I can, I don't.
Yeah.
And again, that goes to discipline.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so there are people who would argue like, but having my coffee in a cafe like Dad, right, brings me gratification every day, and I like this. Yeah, I don't want to say that if you're in the financial situation where you can have a coffee in a cafe every day, okay, fine. But we make choices, and you can't complain about the choices you can't make based on the choices you do make, right? If you choose to make that decision that you're going to buy a coffee every day in a cafe, then you can't complain about the opportunities you can't have because you've spent that money already. I don't know. That's how I view it, but I think people would complain about both of those. Yeah. There's also the Journal of Consumer Research in 2014 did a study that says people who were more future-focused, delayed gratification, had better even financial health and higher career satisfaction, which I guess ties into what we were talking about now about financial health. So we can skip over that. Anything else you want to mention about delayed gratification? I forgot, how did you teach? So Delaney and I think that we naturally have this concept. We understand delayed gratification. And I guess I thought that was just something that everybody understood. But how were you able to teach that to us? Was that something intentional you did, or just something that carried over based on what you do? How do you think we learned that from you guys?
We did have a system of rewards that you had to earn rewards and able to do something special. That was more of an encouragement for you guys to be good. To be good. But those sorts of things help to get you in the mindset of discipline and delayed gratification. But also although we lived in New Zealand, we lived very simply.
Oh, yeah.
We had no money. I remember when we first moved to New Zealand commenting, we can't even afford to eat at McDonald's.
Yeah,
we couldn't afford to eat out at all. It was very expensive to live there. So, the thing is that you don't have a lot. So then, when you get something, it's more special, and you're willing to wait longer for it, because the option is not to go out and have it right away.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I do think a lot of it was, I am more of a simplistic lifestyle, but also that we didn't have a lot to be able to go out and.
Yeah. I guess about the point system. So the way it works, if I remember, if we did our chores, if we were on good behavior, did something especially good, helpful, I guess, we got points. And then we could use those points to go to the movies, which was a lot of points. I think like 20 or 40 points. It was a lot of points. Or do something special with friends, or maybe eat dessert or something, because we didn't have dessert much growing up. Something like that. So I guess that also teaches delayed gratification, because I remember we would save our points, right?
You would.
I would. My brother wouldn't. We could have like an extra hour of TV or video games. So instead of doing that, we could save our points and do something bigger or higher, I guess. So that definitely taught it. And you also taught us about saving money from childhood. We had an allowance. You wouldn't just give us money whenever we wanted. So we had to choose, okay, if I spend this money, I'm not going to have it later. So you did that. Yeah. Okay, last thing I wanted to do, more focus back on you, was the way I see you. Maybe sometimes I think I misunderstand who you are too. How do I see you? You're very serving, but not in front of people. You're behind the scenes serving, maybe less recently than in the past, but very willing to help, to serve people. You're kind, but I think people also misunderstand you because you're more serious, I guess, more straight-faced. And so maybe people think of you as, I don't know, unkind, or I don't know. What do you think people misunderstand about you?
I am an introvert, so I am very reserved in public. So I always used to get accused of being stuck up, like at college. And maybe that is sort of the way I come across, I guess, because I am reserved and not very outgoing. So it didn't bother me. I didn't think I was stuck up, but I didn't really care if you thought I was. But yeah, I think it is just personality type.
I get accused of that too. People are surprised to find I'm an introvert because I can turn on my extroverted self for teaching or something like that. I can turn on my charisma, I guess, which I guess comes more from Dad. But I don't know, we're very quiet in our family, and if we don't have anything to say, we just don't say anything. But I guess people think that's a bit stuck up or something, so I'm the same there. Okay. Well, Mom, thanks for being on the podcast forcibly. Guys, next week my dad will be on the podcast. He doesn't know it yet, but next week he'll be on the podcast.
He likes to talk, so he'll be fine with that, about himself.
Yeah. And I'm with my parents a few more weeks, so if you'd like to see my mom again on the podcast, please let me know what you'd like to hear about. Also, if you're in Astana, this weekend my parents will be at a picnic with me. I'll post the details later. So thanks, guys, and have a good day. See you next time.